Over the past year, I've started to enjoy shaving with an old-fashioned safety razor. Despite some early misadventures and self-mutilation, I've come to enjoy this rather antiquated routine of self-care, and I've also found a similar pleasure in the weirdly satisfying process of giving a mirror shine to dress shoes. And the people that I've learned these skills from are who I want to talk about today. A niche collection of YouTube menswear and lifestyle channels that coexist perhaps unknowingly next to the cheekier and irreverent subcultures of Anarcho-Dandyism and British Chapism. This is a video dedicated to said niche, celebrating its existence and hopefully making a few converts along the way. So, join me today as I say, all hail the Chap. Consider two channels that will henceforth exemplify the aesthetic in menswear that I want to talk about. Kirby Allison of the Hanger Project, and the Gentleman's Gazette as presented by Sven Raphael Schneider, Preston Schuler and Kyle Thibodeau. There are other channels that would fall into this unnamed niche, but these are two of the channels that I watch the most of, so they'll serve as muses for now. Kirby Allison's channel is quite upmarket and features a lot of collaborations with various craftsmen, cigar specialists and high-end tailors. It's a great channel exploring the history and workings of these industries, and although he is often given access to very influential people, you get the sense that these are figures that mainstream media doesn't often speak to. The Gentleman's Gazette, on the other hand, is a little more introductory and tends to cover a slightly broader range of topics ranging from the history of the suit to budget purchase recommendations, and publishes various tutorials on things like tying a tie, making use of contrasting colours, and even how to make small talk. Both channels have their own flavour when it comes to the art of the fancy lad, but what is interesting is that both urge their viewers to reject the glistening allure of fast fashion and locate the good life in the comforts of an old-fashioned gentleman. And this call to reconsider the past has some appeal. In recent years, we have seen a rising discomfort with the pace and trends of modern life, and more people are opting for a relationship with technology in the modern world that emphasises quality over quantity. There are now digital retreats where creatives and other presumably very middle-class people pay large sums of money to escape the online hell that is the modern smartphone, and many people are now opting not to own a smartphone at all, with plenty others just quitting social media altogether. We've also become more conscious of the relationship between the clothing industry and the environment. Fast fashion is a term that has arisen to describe the supply chain that makes and sells clothes only to be worn for a few seasons before being thrown out. It's an industry responsible for a huge amount of wasted water and materials, and consumes huge amounts of energy making these garments and shipping them to their respective places of sale. To combat this, some people turn to sites like eBay and apps like Vinted to buy and sell pre-loved goods. Sometimes because it is an easy way to make money, but also because as a seller you can take relief in knowing that your once beloved jacket has not ended up in a scrap heap, and as a buyer you can enjoy the knowledge that you're reducing your carbon footprint. Both channels directly and indirectly speak to these gripes with the modern world, and they suggest an alternative aesthetic that focuses on quality goods that are designed to be timeless and lasting. Though it's worth noting that not everyone will always be able to afford the specific products that these channels may recommend. The infamous Boots theory of wealth inequality springs to mind. It's a theory put forward by the character Sam Vines in the Terry Pratchett Discworld novel Men-at-Arms. A man who could afford $50 had a pair of boots that'd still be keeping his feet dry in 10 years' time, while a poor man who could only afford cheap boots would have spent $100 on boots in the same time and would still have wet feet. And plenty of Kirby Allison's videos feature products and services that most people will never be able to realistically afford without some serious financial planning. Luckily, the Gentleman's Gazette often covers the more affordable side of the gentleman's aesthetic, and so it's pretty clear that there are ways to obtain the look and quality that these channels promote, even if you're on a budget. And although Kirby's videos often showcase the really high-end stuff that a lot of people can't afford, he does a great job of marketing industries like cobbling and tailoring, which, again, are industries we're going to need in abundance to move beyond our flippant culture of wear it once and throw it out. If we're all going to start wearing clothes and accessories that are intended to last us years, if not decades, then that means we will need a lot more cobblers, dressmakers and tailors who can produce, mend and alter clothes that are meant to last. And complementing this attitude towards fast fashion, there's also the recreational activities that these channels promote. Whether it's cigar smoking or fountain pen calligraphy, there's an appreciation on display of activities that are focused on quality rather than quantity, and a return to more traditional pastimes. Kirby Allison talks about how cigars provide a dedicated space to slow down and enjoy another person's company, and Schneider, a collector of fountain pens, also has a similar fondness of such activities. Now, I can't say that participating in these activities is necessary to humanity's survival in the same way that developing a culture of sustainable clothing is. Human civilization as we know it will not collapse simply because too many people have stopped smoking cohibas. But I think it's interesting that both channels are products of a digital environment and encourage a return to an almost conservative aesthetic to escape the excesses of the disposable modern world. However, Schneider of the Gentleman's Gazette has been quick to point out that he doesn't think this should ever deter modern progressive individuals from dressing a certain way or enjoying a vintage aesthetic. He is, as per his comments on camera, very much in favour of old-fashioned style with modern values, a sentiment similar to that of the vintage style icon and big band leader Dandy Wellington, who has vintage style, not vintage values, on all sorts of merch and has greatly popularised the term. Videos like What It Means to Be a Gentleman Today that appear on his channel are all about updating the notion of the gentleman to fit with the modern world. But I've seen it argued even further that enjoying this kind of vintage aesthetic comes with a tacit endorsement of these eras' social politics that is impossible to avoid. But I disagree here. For instance, alongside classic menswear, I love the world of medieval taverns and inns, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to ask my doctor to skip the antibiotics in favour of some good old-fashioned bloodletting. While people can use these aesthetics to dress up their nostalgia for patriarchy or open homophobia, it's also very possible to liberate these aesthetics, and even some of the ethics hidden in them, so that we can enjoy them in a fresh, rebellious, even progressive way. And that brings us now to the wonderfully weird world of the Chap. The Chap is a magazine, first published in 1999 in Britain, that still today publishes articles and interviews all catered towards the modern chap. It is the beating heart of Anarcho-Dandyism, and understanding the magazine's playful revelry is essential to understanding modern chapism. Becoming a chap involves adhering to the Chap Manifesto, found on the magazine's website, where it outlines the movement's 10 commandments. These require adherents, among other things, to throw out their denim jeans, take up smoking, preferably in the form of a pipe, and always leave the last button of their waistcoat undone. And after abiding by this strict code of conduct, you may find yourself wanting of confirmation of your status as a chap, in which case you can send in a photo of yourself for the editors at the Chap to review. But if you expect anything other than derision in return, then I'm afraid you are very much in the wrong place, because Am I Chap is the magazine's longest running joke. It is where readers volunteer photos of themselves to be mercilessly savaged by its editors. It is here that we find that much of chapism is actually defined by silliness, the peak of which is arguably found in the Chap Olympiad, held regularly in London and is essentially a sports day for anarcho-dandies that features umbrella jousting and not playing tennis. There are plenty of other funny stunts that the Chap magazine has orchestrated over the years, with its brand of humour revolving mainly around absurdist demonstrations spearheaded by well-dressed guerrilla activists. The most recent example, though I don't think it was officially organised by the Chap magazine, was Troy Hawk, a comedian who in quintessential anarcho-dandy fashion baffled the management of various high street shops by standing outside greeting and complimenting its customers.
They're complaining that I'm greeting them.
Yeah, it's not what we're about.
You don't like
No.
friendliness. Fair enough, I understand. I'm off brand.
Yeah.
Welcome
It's
to
just-
B&Q, Sarah. I hope you
Yeah.
find everything you need.
No.
Now, a lot of this is just British people being British and silly, but there is a slightly more sincere side to this. First of all, there's a democratisation of certain notions of luxury and class, something that the Gentleman's Gazette is keen on promoting. It's also, in its more flamboyant moments, kind of reminiscent of the gay ballroom culture in the US in the 80s, where performers derived a lot of self-worth through appropriating the customs, manners and clothing of powerful people. There are also those who participate in forms of anarcho-dandyism as a response to the erosion of social etiquette that would normally help people navigate the various expectations of modern life. A chapist can use the excuse of anarcho-dandyism to dress up without worrying about whether he is going somewhere which is smart casual, or casual casual, or evening business, business casual, or some other perverted hybrid of dress code. And this is why it makes perfect sense for channels like Gentleman's Gazette to field videos that take retro vintage principles and apply them to things like making friends and eating in a restaurant. With so many different standards of etiquette and attitudes regarding what is appropriate, what is rude, and what is old-fashioned, the Gentleman's Gazette's etiquette videos offer a similar way forward, similar to that offered by the school of Anarcho-Dandyism, where you adopt a more formal stance as a way of just cutting through all the guff and ambiguity. Chapism uses a return to a more conservative style of dress to correct the confusion of modern life, while also acting as a rebellion against consumerism, and excitingly, it has largely resisted having this rebellion become an exclusively conservative phenomenon. Chap hop artists like Professor Elemental and chap hop superstar himself, Mr. B the Gentleman Rhymer, whose music is used throughout this video, tend to make music about resisting the powers that be, refusing to conform and accepting our quirks, and it's all rather progressive in tone. The Chap magazine has its own gender writer, for example. To be clear though, there are conservative chaps in existence who haven't quite caught on to the fact that chapism is a movement inspired in part by a Marxist philosopher, and whose motifs frequently reference leftist art and slogans. But in general, the chap leans towards celebrating the strange rather than suppressing diversity. Though plenty of grifters have tried to sell the miserable humbuggery of conservatism as an antidote to modern life, that's not what chapism or these channels are trying to do. And though I'm sure that neither the staff at the Gentleman's Gazette nor Alison Kirby will see their channels quite in the way that I do, I think there's a lot to celebrate here and a lot of potential. Whether it is the straight-faced love of craftsmanship and an earnest desire to promote a slower pace of life, or that same aesthetic rendered through the cheeky rebelliousness of chapism, there's a lot to enjoy and a lot of fun to be found here. So that's my video. It should be obvious by now that I'm not a scholar of fashion or aesthetics. I just wanted to share and talk about a few of the things I enjoy when it comes to classic menswear and lifestyle. Finally, I'd recommend that you check out the channels mentioned and the music of Mr. B the Gentleman Rhymer. He's on Spotify, Apple Music and various corners of YouTube, and graciously allowed me to use lots of his music in making this video. Of course, also pop over to the Chap magazine and consider adopting at least a few of the 10 Commandments. It is, after all, wonderfully fun being a chap.